At 69, I thought my biggest challenge was perfecting my garden, not fighting for my home. My son, a celebrated financial analyst, promised me security. Instead, he stole my peace, gambling my future on a lie. He forgot one thing: an old woman's quiet life can hold the fiercest fight. For 40 years, my world had been a symphony of clattering pans, boisterous laughter, and the constant, demanding hum of a business I'd built from the ground up. I had managed demanding chefs, negotiated with tough-as-nails suppliers, and balanced books down to the last cent. That life had forged a resilience in me I thought I'd never lose. Now the silence of my paid-off suburban house was my reward, a quiet I cherished. My greatest pride, however, wasn't the legacy of my restaurant, but my son, Nathan. At 42, he was a brilliant financial analyst at a prestigious investment firm downtown, a world away from the flour-dusted aprons of my past. He was my masterpiece, the story I polished and presented to my friends over our weekly bridge game. His success felt like my own, a validation of all my sacrifices. But in the last year, a subtle, dissonant note had begun to play during his Sunday visits. Amidst the talk of his work and my quiet life, he would invariably steer the conversation toward my finances. It began as a gentle current and slowly grew into a persistent tide. "Mom, are you still keeping most of your savings in that low-yield account?" he'd ask, swirling the expensive wine he always brought. "It's practically losing money to inflation." Soon, his concern felt less like care and more like a forensic audit. He'd probe the specifics of my portfolio, the value of my home, the details of my pension. He'd dismiss my conservative, debt-free strategies with a patient, almost condescending sigh. "That's old-school thinking, Mom. You're letting your money sleep. I could help you make it asterisk work for you, really grow it." He spoke a language of alphas, diversification, and market exposure that was designed to sound both impressive and impenetrable. I'd nod along, feeling a confusing mixture of pride in his expertise and a quiet unease I couldn't name. He was my son, my brilliant boy. He only wanted the best for me. I trusted him. That trust was the foundation of my world, and I never imagined he was the one holding the sledgehammer. It happened on a crisp autumn Sunday. The aroma of my slow-cooked pot roast filled the house, a scent of tradition and comfort. After we'd cleared the plates, Nathan asked me to stay at the table. He pulled a sleek, leather-bound binder from his briefcase, placing it on the polished wood with a heavy, significant thud. "Mom," he began, his voice taking on the smooth, confident tone I'd heard him use on business calls. "I've come across a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's a private equity fund, pre-IPO placement in some groundbreaking tech sectors. The potential for alpha is extraordinary." He opened the binder. It was filled with charts, graphs, and dense paragraphs of text. Words like diversification, leveraged growth, and projected returns flew at me, a verbal smokescreen I couldn't see through. He pointed to soaring upward lines, tapping the glossy paper. "This is an institutional-grade investment. Normally, you'd need millions to even get a look in. But a senior partner owes me a favor. I got you a seat at the table." A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. "Nathan, it sounds complicated. Your father and I, we always believed in simple. Bricks and mortar blue-chip stocks." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Mom, that's precisely why you've been leaving so much money on the table. You worked your entire life. Don't you think you deserve a truly luxurious retirement? Let your money work for you for a change." He leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "This is what I do. I'm an expert, trust me. When have I ever steered you wrong?" He slid a sheaf of papers out from the back of the binder, fanning them out before me. "These are just standard authorization forms. They allow me to move the funds and manage the portfolio on your behalf. Just a formality to get everything set up." He pointed to several yellow tabs marked, "Sign here." I looked from his expectant face to the impenetrable documents. Every instinct I'd honed over 40 years of business screamed caution. But this wasn't a supplier trying to pad an invoice. This was Nathan, my son, the boy whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college tuition I'd paid without a second thought. To doubt him felt like a betrayal. I don't know, honey. It's a lot of money, and I'll protect every penny of it as if it were my own," he said, his voice soft and reassuring. I'm your son, Mom. I would never, ever let anything happen to you. His words were the key that unlocked my defenses. I picked up the pen. My signature, once a mark of authority on countless checks and contracts, felt small and unsteady. I was signing away more than money. I was signing away control, placing my future in his hands as an act of faith. He smiled, gathered the papers, and kissed my cheek. You won't regret this, he said, before walking out the door, leaving me alone in the sudden quiet. The promised first quarter returns never materialized. The first month passed in a state of quiet anticipation. I imagined Nathan, busy at his desk, expertly managing my future. The second month, a small seed of worry took root. I'd mention it to him on the phone, and he'd be breezily reassuring. These things take time, Mom. It's not a savings account. Be patient. By the end of the third month, the silence from Nathan was a heavy, unanswered question in my house. Then the letter arrived. It wasn't from my usual bank, nor from Nathan's prestigious firm. The envelope was stiff, beige, with a cold, plastic window revealing my name and address. The sender was a Sterling Bridge Capital, a name I'd never heard of. My hands trembled slightly as I tore it open. The words swam before my eyes, then snapped into horrifying focus. Final notice of delinquency. It spoke of an outstanding loan in the amount of $250,000. It mentioned default, penalties, and the term collateral, followed by the legal description of my property. My house. A cold wave washed over me, so intense I had to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to stay upright. A loan, Nathan had said it was an investment. I fumbled for my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice clipped. Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Nathan, I gasped, the word barely a whisper. I got a letter from a company called Sterling Bridge Capital. It says I owe them $250,000. It says it's a loan. There was a pause. For a moment, I heard nothing but the faint static on the line. Okay, Mom, just calm down, he said, his voice losing its warmth, replaced by a sharp edge of irritation. Don't overreact. It's just market volatility. There was a downturn. It's a temporary paper loss. Loss. Nathan, it says it's an asterisk loan. It says I'm delinquent. It says they can take my house. My voice cracked, rising with panic. A heavy sigh came through the phone. It was the sigh of a man burdened not with concern, but with annoyance. Look, it's complicated financial structuring. I used leverage to maximize the upside. Of course, it's technically a loan. How else was I supposed to get that kind of capital into the fund? The coldness in his tone was a slap in the face. You never said that. You told me you were investing my savings. You never said you were taking out a loan in my name. And then the final mask fell away. Mom, you signed the papers, didn't you? He snapped, his voice hard and devoid of any affection. You're almost 70 years old. It's time you took some responsibility for your own decisions. I was trying to help you. I was trying to make you rich. It's not my fault the market turned. You can't pin all the blame on me now that it's gone south. The line went dead, but I kept the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. In that crushing silence, I felt the love I had for my son, a love that had defined my life for 42 years, shatter. It didn't fade. It broke, like glass, leaving behind only sharp, cutting edges. The boy I had raised was gone. In his place was a stranger, one who would watch my world burn and then blame me for holding the match. The heartbreak was a physical force. It settled in my chest, a dense, suffocating weight. For a full day, I did nothing. I sat in the armchair facing the garden, but I didn't see the roses I had so carefully tended. I saw only the reflection of a foolish old woman in the glass. The shame was as bitter as the grief. He had used my love and my ignorance as weapons against me. But on the second day, something shifted. The grief didn't vanish, but it began to cool, to harden. I was not just a grieving mother. I was Gloria, the woman who had stared down health inspectors, fired a belligerent chef in the middle of a dinner rush, and single-handedly run La Perla for 4 decades. I had built an empire on tenacity and shrewdness. That woman was still here. He had forgotten who I was. I picked up the phone, but I didn't call Nathan. I called David Chen, the accountant who had managed La Perla's books for 30 years. He was a quiet, meticulous man whose loyalty was as unshakable as his command of numbers. "David," I said, my voice steady for the first time in 48 hours. "I need your help. I'm in trouble." He was at my house within the hour. I laid everything out on the dining room table. The glossy binder from Nathan, the letter from Sterling Bridge Capital, my own bank statements. I told him the whole story, my voice flat and devoid of the emotion that had crippled me. David listened without interruption, his brow furrowed. He put on his reading glasses and began to examine the documents I had signed. He spent a long time reading the fine print, his lips a thin, tight line. Finally, he took his glasses off and looked at me, his expression grim. "Gloria," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "this is much worse than a failed investment. Nathan didn't just have you authorize a transfer. This document is a power of attorney, but it's specifically tailored for credit applications. And this," he tapped the loan agreement, "this is a secured loan against your primary residence. He didn't just invest your money. He used your good name and your home as collateral to borrow $250,000. He lied about the nature of the entire transaction." The clinical, legal term for Nathan's betrayal sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. "So what does it mean?" I asked. "It means," David said, his gaze unwavering, "that this isn't a family dispute anymore. This is potentially financial fraud." Fraud, the word hung in the air, ugly and final. It was the nail in the coffin of the mother-son relationship I had mourned. But it was also a key. It transformed me from a victim into a plaintiff. David's words didn't just confirm my fears, they gave me a path. My son had built a cage of financial jargon and emotional manipulation around me. Now I would use the cold, hard logic of the law to tear it down. "What do I need to do?" I asked, the steel returning to my spine. David leaned forward. "To have any chance of fighting this with the bank and the law, we need irrefutable proof that he knowingly misled you. We need to hear it from his own mouth." A plan began to form in my mind, sharp and clear. I would not be the weeping mother anymore. I would be the woman he had underestimated. I would give him one last chance to tell the truth, and I would be ready when he lied. A week later, I called Nathan. I spent an hour practicing my voice, making it sound frail, tremulous, and edged with the hysteria he expected. When he answered, I didn't accuse. I pleaded. "Nathan, please," I sobbed into the phone, the sound echoing convincingly in my quiet kitchen. "I can't sleep. This Sterling Bridge company keeps calling. They're talking about foreclosure. I'm going to lose the house, Nathan. I'm going to lose everything your father and I worked for." I let my voice crack, a carefully orchestrated performance of a broken woman. "You have to help me. Please, can you just come over and explain it to me one more time? Maybe I can call them, offer a payment plan. I don't know what to do." There was a long pause, and I could almost hear the calculations whirring in his head. A panicked mother was a liability, but a mother he could manage, one he could pacify with more lies, was an asset. "All right, Mom," he sighed, the sound a mix of exasperation and relief. "I'll come by after work. Don't do anything until I get there. Just calm down." Before he arrived, I set the stage. I rumpled my hair, put on an old, faded cardigan, and dabbed my eyes with water to make them look red. I placed the loan documents on the coffee table, a prop in my little play. On the small side table next to my armchair, nestled behind a potted orchid, was my smartphone. The screen was dark, but the voice recorder app was active, the little red icon silently capturing every sound in the room. When Nathan walked in, he saw exactly what he expected to see. His hysterical, clueless mother on the verge of collapse. It disarmed him completely. He didn't see a predator, he saw a problem he needed to manage. "Okay, let's go over this again," he said, sinking into the sofa opposite me, radiating an air of condescending authority. "They said it was a loan," I whispered, looking up at him with wide, tearful eyes. "You said it was an investment." He scoffed, a small, arrogant sound. "Mom, it's the same principle. It's called leveraged financing. I told you that. It's a way to amplify the returns. I used your assets to secure the capital. It's standard practice for high net worth individuals. But you never said I could lose my house," I cried. This was the moment. I watched his face, saw the flicker of annoyance cross his features as he decided to drop the pretense and move into damage control. Because it wasn't supposed to be a possibility. The fund was a sure thing. I explained the risk-reward profile. Obviously, there's always some risk, but it was minimal. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a lecturing tone, as if I were a child. Look, I didn't spell it out in black and white, because I didn't want to worry you with technicalities you wouldn't understand anyway. I was handling it. The core of the problem isn't the loan, it's the unforeseen market crash. That's the real issue. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm, a drumbeat of cold fury. So, you knew it was a loan all along? I asked, my voice small. He threw his hands up in exasperation. Yes, of course I knew it was a loan. How else do you think we were going to get access to a $250,000 fund? With your savings account. Be realistic. I made an executive decision to structure it this way for maximum benefit. My only mistake was being too optimistic about the market. You just need to keep up with the payments for a while, and your credit will be fine. It's not the end of the world. He sat back, satisfied, believing he had once again smoothed over the situation, confident in my ignorance and his superiority. He had just handed me the weapon I needed, polished and ready to fire. I looked at him, the son I no longer recognized, and felt nothing but a profound, chilling clarity. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, then gave a small, defeated nod. Okay, Nathan, I said softly. I think I understand now. The next morning, the performance was over. I dressed in my best suit, the one I used to wear for important meetings at the restaurant. It felt like armor. With David by my side, I walked into the downtown tower that housed the headquarters of Sterling Bridge Capital. We didn't ask for the customer service desk. We asked for their legal and fraud investigation department. We were led to a sterile, glass-walled conference room. A stern-faced woman in a sharp blazer, the bank's head of risk management, sat across from us. She began with a scripted, defensive posture, speaking of contractual obligations and signed documents. I let her finish. Then I placed my phone on the polished table. I believe you are the victim of fraud, just as I am, I said, my voice resonating with a calm authority that made her sit up straighter. My son, Nathan, a financial analyst at a reputable firm, secured this loan by deliberately misrepresenting its nature to me. I have proof. I pressed play. Nathan's voice filled the silent room, arrogant, condescending, and utterly damning. Yes, of course, I knew it was a loan. I didn't spell it out in black and white because I didn't want to worry you with technicalities you wouldn't understand anyway. I made an executive decision. As the recording played, the woman's expression shifted from skepticism to shock, then to cold, corporate fury. She wasn't just hearing a family drama. She was hearing a confession that exposed her company to massive legal liability and a PR nightmare. A loan granted based on deceit to an elderly woman who was explicitly misled by a licensed financial professional. That was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Before the recording even finished, she was typing furiously on her laptop. The bank, to protect itself, moved with brutal efficiency. Within 2 hours, they had agreed in principle to nullify the loan, erase any negative impact on my credit report, and handle Nathan directly. But I wasn't finished. From the bank, David and I went straight to the local police precinct. We filed a formal report for financial fraud and identity theft, submitting copies of the documents and the recording as evidence. The fallout was swift and catastrophic for Nathan. An official police inquiry triggered an immediate internal investigation at his firm. He was suspended without pay. The story, however, was too juicy to be contained. Someone leaked the details. It spread through the city's tight-knit financial community like a virus. Nathan, the brilliant analyst, had tried to leverage his own mother's home for a risky bet, failed, and then got caught. His name was Mud. A week later, a humbled, terrified Nathan, accompanied by his lawyer, offered a deal. He would do anything, sign anything, if I would agree to tell the prosecutors I didn't wish to press criminal charges that would land him in prison. I agreed on one condition. He was to write a full, public letter of apology, admitting to his actions, to be circulated to his company's entire management board. He had used his reputation to destroy my security. I would use the truth to dismantle his. He agreed. The letter was his professional suicide note. His career, the source of his arrogance and my misplaced pride, was over. 6 months later, the silence in my life was no longer empty, but filled with a profound sense of peace. The large suburban house, with its garden and its ghosts, was sold. The memories it held were too complex, too stained by the final, ugly chapter with Nathan. I didn't need the space, and more importantly, I didn't need the reminders. Instead, I bought a beautiful, modern apartment downtown. From my balcony on the 15th floor, I had a sprawling view of the city skyline, a landscape of lights and possibilities. The proceeds from the sale of the house, now unencumbered by fraudulent debts, became my adventure fund. But this time, the investment was solely in myself. I enrolled in an art history course at the local university, something I'd dreamed of doing for 50 years. The smell of old books in the library became my new favorite scent. On Thursdays, my old friends from the Bridge Club and I had a standing date for the symphony orchestra's matinee performances. I never saw Nathan again. I heard, through a distant family grapevine, that he had left the city in disgrace, moving somewhere anonymous to escape the shadow of his failure. I felt no triumph in his ruin, no lingering anger. I simply felt nothing. He was a chapter that was closed, a book returned to a shelf I would never visit again. One crisp afternoon, I sat on my new balcony, a cup of freshly brewed coffee warming my hands. I watched the flow of life on the streets below, a river of strangers with their own stories. There was no bitterness in my heart, only a quiet, powerful sense of freedom. I had spent so long being a mother, a role that had been twisted into a vulnerability and used against me. Now I was just Gloria, a woman of 70, finally living a life that was completely, unapologetically, and wonderfully my own. Thank you all for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I believe in the power of speaking our truth. If you're going through something similar, remember that your peace and dignity are paramount. Don't be afraid to claim them back. I'd love to hear your own stories of strength and justice in the comments below.